Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Sultani of Jima Esports. We are Jima Esports, and this is the Playtime Sessions podcast digital conference series experience on gaming and esports. We've now come to week 10 on this journey of the Playtime Sessions. Thank you for joining us again on another great stream. Just to get you all caught up on everything that we've done throughout the series, we started this as a very high level, conversation for all things gaming and esports. And we've hit different topics like within technology. We got into blockchain, AI. We broke down, what are the supporting services, supporting products within gaming and esports that's enhancing it. Then we went to ad tech, in-game advertisement with BidStack. And we brought it full circle again with some gaming experience with what it looks like for data and how advertisers are going to convert that for their companies. And now today we have a really cool show on back-end operations. This is a very different show from before because we've usually hit a topic that is specific to something in the industry, like health and wellness, like technology, supporting service products, and things of that nature. So today we're going to look at like the back end operations and what that looks like for an esports organization and what that looks like for essentially a team, an organization, and the multiple different titles that they play. And the management of is not so easy. When we get down to it and we learn about teams, it's increasingly becoming more difficult to become profitable. And, hemorrhaging money in esports teams and organizations is not an uncommon thing. I've been very vocal. I've been very transparent in the past of saying our experience with esports teams, albeit in a regional. We owned and operated Royal Youth, as everybody knows, which was a regional TCL team. And it's very difficult to make money even when you're winning championships and sending players around the world. So we're going to learn from Danon today. I'm going to bring him on now. Very special guest, Mr. Danon Flander of the Golden Guardians, which is owned by the Golden State Warriors. The Golden Guardians are a very up-and-coming, large team. They're not up-and-coming by any means, but up-and-coming in their titles that they're looking to compete in because they're really making a name for themselves. And we're going to hear from a massive organization what that looks like, to get, profitability, winning championships, and everything else. So right on time, here we are, Mr. Danon. Thank you so much for coming on today's show. Appreciate your time, brother.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
I did a little bit of an intro. I didn't get into your before with your other teams and stuff, but best you go over it. How did we get here to today of Golden Guardians GM and all things California?
Yeah, we'd have to do a handful of podcasts to cover, I think,
Right?
all my esports history. But just a brief summary. I started off as a League of Legends player back when it was kind of booming as what would eventually clearly be like the number one esport on the planet. I did that for the better part of a year or two while I was in college. Eventually, I transitioned into management while I was still attending university. And at that point, I started looking at building rosters. So back then, there wasn't even a hope of profitability or a concept of what would eventually be these esports organizations, as much as there was just a hunger to win and a hunger to be competitive. And there was obviously an entire system to be built out to understand how you could do that. So I started building rosters for teams like Dignitas, teams like Complexity, ultimately teams like Cloud9, who obviously are at the forefront of esports right now. And just kind of like slowly churned through that process on the like roster management side before starting to helping and building out, initializing a lot of the systems you see today across top esports teams with respect to, all the other facets when it comes to setting up, propping up a social media team, building out your marketing efforts, starting to be more holistic and look at that profitability as something that could be viable. That's kind of like where that started making that transition. Ultimately, about 2 years ago, I actually stepped away from Cloud9. I wanted to get more back into the roots of League of Legends, specifically the LCS, which is the League of Legends Championship Series. At the time, the Golden State Warriors, the NBA organization, had purchased a franchise spot in the LCS. And I thought that was a great time to kind of like bridge my love for traditional sports, which I grew up on, and esports, which I had turned into a career. And so that's what I've been doing the last 2 years, is working for the Golden State Warriors, overseeing their League of Legends efforts in the LCS.
Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, you have a pretty robust experience in your short time as well, because you came from a player, then you went straight into management. Now you're looking at the same type of management, but more of an active operational role of expanding, profit, winning, who knows what the future holds. I know the Golden Guardians well enough to know that they're not going anywhere, right? Where they're not looking to be like one of these other teams, like in the last, really just in the last year, 3 teams pretty much disappeared and now reappeared with new branding and names. But I know that's not in the Golden State Warriors / Golden Guardians' best interest, and that they're looking to establish and stay here. And I know that the Golden State Warriors pedigree is a inherently building, type of organization. As everybody knows or may not know, for our audience, most of our audience comes from Dubai and UK. So for them, the NBA, Golden State Warriors were just maybe 10 years ago one of the worst teams in the league. And they didn't win. And now you can't get them out of your mouth, right? The name out of your mouth. Is that kind of what you guys are going toward for Golden Guardians as well, as like slow and steady wins the race, because we're not going anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really interesting, being what I would recognize this as a post-franchise team. We're a team that came into existence on the back of the league transitioning into franchising. When prior it ran more like a Premier League, there was like a relegation promotion system. Right. Now that we're post-franchise, that gives an organization like the Warriors, whose expertise is coming in, building from the ground up, and trying to like start with a very, very solid foundation and grow from there, the opportunity to do the exact same thing in League of Legends, which is what you're seeing. We have arguably one of the youngest rosters in the league, while still, I would say, exceeding expectations performance-wise consistently. And we have so much more room for growth, arguably, than most of the league. And that's all stemming from our efforts starting a few years ago, where we recognized that we're coming into a space that had already existed. The LCS itself had been functioning with that promotion relegation system for about half a decade at the point. And so we understood that it made more sense to put us on a multi-year pathway to being a consistent, stable, dominant team, much like you saw with the Golden State Warriors ultimately on the back of their recruitment efforts, than it did to try to come in and blow everyone out of the water, spend infinite amounts of money, which many teams have come in to do, and ultimately found that it made more sense for them to like look at a different angle, right? I think we just came out the gate with a smarter approach, which aligns very directly with what the NBA, with what the NBA organization likes to do.
It's easy to say the common thing that I'm sure you get, or just being a third party in the background. I know the team, and I know esports, and I know the international esports, but it's really easy to say, and I'm sure you hear a lot, well, you guys are the Golden State Warriors. Of course you guys can afford anything. And of course you guys can. You got the Chase Arena, and look at your shirt. It's a beautiful Nike right there. Like not everybody gets this, and so obviously that's cliche to say, and that's not indicative of success, because you've seen people pour money into franchises and nothing comes out of it. And vice versa this year, just specific to the LCS, the Golden Guardians made the playoffs in 5th place. And the 4th place team, when it's all said and done, is Cloud9. And Cloud9, I think, let's just go out on the limb and say they're $1 million plus for salaries.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's minimum, right? So you got to look at economies of scale, and you got to take off your League of Legends hat off, and you got to put the business cap on, and you got to be like, okay, I'm not going to triple and quadruple and whatever the salaries. We got to slow and steady win the race. I like what you said about more room to grow, right? Because merch, social media, just winning more, higher level championships and getting better. You guys do have a massive opportunity to really grow and to win the damn thing, as you guys proved this year, So what's it going to take for the organization not to become Cloud9, because let's be honest, we're a long way away from being Cloud9. Let's not kid each other and say Golden Guard, but it has that trajectory, right? So what's it going to take? Is it just continuing to do the same success? Or is it going to be like, man, we got to win a championship to, like, you know, take it to the next level so that everybody wants to play for us?
I think there's a couple different approaches, obviously, that different organizations are taking. I think some teams look at it and say the only way we're going to be functional, viable is taking a championship. I think a good example of that is Evil Geniuses, who came into the league just this year. It looked like they spent a lot of money out the gate. They spent a lot of money on buyouts for players from other teams, namely from Cloud9, really looking to like very immediately emulate that success. And I think the struggle they've found now, or at least they're probably finding, is that just trying to like winning games at the gate, one, isn't as easy as people would like to think it is, and two, isn't necessarily just an amazing immediate reaction from the community. Doesn't like warrant an immediate reaction from the community to support your team and say, you know, build that same grassroots amount of foundation that these endemic teams have. I think what we've seen, what we recognize, is that what really matters is actually being able to articulate how you got where you got. And like what actual correct steps you took, right? I think a lot of teams have a hard time historically articulating, saying this is what we're doing and why. Or when they swing and miss, they don't want to say it, right? They don't want to say like, we took a chance, we wanted to angle on this, it didn't work out. I think Golden Guardians, with having the experience, the maturity from the NBA organization, is so much more equipped to actually have those conversations out the gate. So people can actually look at our trajectory, understand every decision we've made. You can actually point pretty much to every spot on the axis to recognize exactly how we got where we got and how we're getting where we're going. Whereas a lot of other teams, it's kind of like push and pull, like, okay, they're spending money, they're not spending money, they're marketing, they're not marketing. There isn't really like a clear business outline. I think we're actually a really good template for other teams to recognize how to do it correctly.
I do agree on the template, because you're doing it the right way and you're not overspending, you're not overcompensating. Sometimes overspending is a double-edged sword. Like, let's just give an example for this league, right? Like Bjergsen. Bjergsen is one of the biggest names in the world, right? But if you Google him, any team would write a blank check for him, because he doesn't just come with really good gameplay and a dominant mid. He actually is a solid businessman. He's a solid personality. He's got a massive social media presence, and that's a convertible for the league, right? But you don't get many Bjergsens.
Yeah.
So if you don't get many Bjergsens, you should not overcompensate for a Bjergsen type player. And just off the heels of what had happened, like you said, in EG, they overpaid for a lot of their roster last year. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't even think they made playoffs last year. Or maybe they did, and they dropped out in sixth place, but they had a massive roster salary lineup. Yeah,
so this latest year, they made playoffs, but they weren't blowout situations. Right, I think like spring, which is where like expectations are really high because it was the roster they'd meant to manifest. They'd like very clearly said, this is our roster. Right. Our goal, like they made it like their company tagline was to kind of topple the number 1 seed, which is like their primary goal. I think the struggle ended up being that the number 1 seed kind of toppled themselves. So instead of getting to claim that a little flat, and then ultimately in summer they came through and had what was kind of almost a worse iteration of their spring attempt. Right. So ultimately coming out the gate and kind of pushing on every different layer that they could in the immediate, without like I think a ton of forethought on like what that's going to do like down the road for them, ends up feeling a little. It kind of just feels a little disingenuous, right, for ultimately what they were trying to do.
And you got to look at like, look, take your league hat off and put your business hat on. Is like, that's a lot of money. Let's be honest, right? It's a lot of money. And, you know, in the UK where we do most of our work, and in Dubai, you know, you look at companies in esports and gaming and you look at the money that they spent or their burn rate and how much they're spending. And you're like, well, what did you show for it? Right. And this year's example, like C9 had the best run in LCS history last split. anybody would have put their last dollar on their bet that they would go to Worlds, at least go to Worlds, you know?
Yeah, at a minimum.
At a minimum. And I can't imagine the demoralization in the organization right now because you didn't even get to Worlds. And that's really, really tough. So going back to the template that you said, it's interesting and it's important to note and remove the stigma, everybody out there listening, of the Golden State Warriors, of the money, because you got to have money to play this game. Let's not kid ourselves. You got to have money to buy the bid, right? And so, are you still with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think I lost your video, but all good. I think, you know, what we see, you know, out of the Golden Guardians is a really good example of what to do. You know, as far as what you look at your competition is C9, you know, TL, FlyQuest, and TSM. Let's be honest. Now we've entered this new echelon of, you know, what we are, and, you know, what does it look like? What is it going to take now? I know you said a bit of winning. I know you said a bit of, you know, everything, but, you know, is it going to be merch? Is it going to be a championship, or is we just got to continue doing what we do best?
So I think if you give it enough time, obviously winning can do it, right? You can win for the better part of 3 years and magically manifest some amount of presence, but it's not very cost effective, and it's also not very consistent. We've not seen like an amazing correlation between spending money and winning, especially in League of Legends, but typically across most esport titles, actually. I think we found that a lot of like the endemic experience from people who've been in the scene for a long time tends to trump just overspending. With respect to like what's going to put us on to the next year, I think it's going to be that multi-pronged effort. I think merch is obviously an area that, like, I think you need to be present. I don't know if you need to, I guess in the case of like 100 Thieves, in the case of Team Liquid, where they almost have turned more into merchandising companies than they have esports entertainment organizations. That's definitely like a viable pathway that I think makes sense for what they're trying to do. But I think when it comes to what we're doing with respect to our tenure in sports in general on the back of the Golden State Warriors, the thing that matters to us is being a valuable entertainment property. We want to be a top recognized competitive team and be rewarded for those efforts. So building merch in unison with the team's success makes more sense than just like building a successful merchandising operation and not winning. And the same way that recognizing and seeing opportunities to build out those content series. I think some teams kind of fell into the trap of overindulging themselves on content early on and trying to build this like following on their YouTube channel. Again, losing sight of the fact that you want to be rewarded and compensated appropriately for winning, for finding your success. And those tend to go hand in hand. You actually have an easier time typically building a content presence that's successful when you have a team of people that people want to watch, that people want to follow, right? I think we're doing all of these things at the same time. Like we've started doing, I think, some more unique, more like directly aligned with our branding merchandising. We're starting to see, I think, if you haven't seen, we just put our 3-episode series for the regular season. I think we have a 4th episode coming for playoffs around content that really humanizes the players and makes them.
Give us more.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about esports content relative to traditional sports content is it humanizes the players a lot more. I think the thing people love about esports, the reason people get into this industry, is because the players are so much more accessible. Obviously, they grew up on social media, and not only that, there's platforms like Twitch, there's platforms like YouTube Live, Facebook has its streaming operations. All of these different initiatives exist. That gives you so many more cool avenues to relate to players. So humanizing them through content does a lot. So as long as we're like hitting all of these different angles, I think that's actually what's going to elevate. I don't think like us winning a split automatically just makes us, you know, one of these like top endemic teams that's been in the space for 8 years. I think it's going to have to be all of these things aligned and in lockstep. And I think we're one of the teams that's most in position to claim that.
I agree 100%, because if you were to win tomorrow, it's not, of course, it's cliche. Of course, you're going to get the recognition. Everybody in the world will go nuts. Golden State Warriors, blah, blah, blah. But it's almost like you better repeat it next year too, right?
Yep.
Because now
the second you open that door, you are setting a standard. And we want to set that standard, but we want to set that standard because we're ready to uphold the standard.
Right.
We don't want to just we don't want to spend money, pop up overnight and win a championship. And then at that point, we're like, how do we do this again? How do we stabilize? I think a lot of people don't recognize kind of like the evolution of what happens when you hit such a high standard.
And just for everybody, I linked the YouTube in the chat or in the stage area, but you can take a look at that. It's a 3-part series on pretty much the season and the road to the playoffs and worlds. For everybody, just quickly who may not know or didn't follow, Golden Guardians just fell short of going to Worlds, which would have been the biggest story in esports around the world. And I would argue that I think they're the most scary team in the LCS by far. And if you look at just like a couple other regionals in the world, you're probably the most scary team around the world right now if you guys come back the same way, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that you're spot on in saying you're building because, just really quickly for our audience, FlyQuest this year, great organization, great everything, but they might win the damn thing this year. And next year, I'm thinking you better be at it again,
Yeah, no, for sure. I think historically, the teams that we've struggled against, we found a lot of success against most recently. And I think there's always been kind of this understanding that once we break into the upper echelon of teams, that we're going to be pretty consistently dominant in that space. And I think we just hinted at that, right? We definitely broke through a doorway this latest playoffs, and fell just only a few games short of qualifying for Worlds, which is closer than probably about the other half of the league. So with that being the case, especially with how young we are, with how little we have to pivot around, a lot of teams have a lot of problems they need to solve, and they have not a lot of time to do it, only a few months. In our case, we have nowhere to go but up.
Right. Yeah, and just talking about the success of the team and in the infancy of the 3 years, 4 years that you guys have been competing, and then looking at the microcosm of this year and the coming year. So this year, these last 2 splits and the upcoming 2 splits, they're really exponential growth right now. The last 2 splits, you guys obviously crushed it and you keep going up. So if anybody researches the Golden Guardians, the one thing that they'll recognize very quickly, your eyes will notice that it went from 10th to 9th to 6th to 5, and maybe next year 3 and 2.
Yep.
So that's something that any investor from the business side looks at. Not that you guys have investors or need them because it's an organization, but the higher ups that are making the decisions to say, hey, should we spend any more money or should we just do the Echo Fox, sell and go away? They're probably looking at this like, okay, look, we're saving money, or, we're doing good, we're winning, and we have a massive trajectory. So let's continue to support this beast and throw fuel on the fire. Is that the general tone of the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously in our case, it's a little unique in that we don't have an investor pool that you can immediately pull on. But with respect to brands that are looking to get in the space, with respect to recognizing marketing efforts, the opportunity for sales, I think we're obviously an amazing example of a team that you can get in early. You can build very real, a very genuine, and actual organic relationship with, which I think is so very difficult oftentimes in esports these days. I think a lot of people skip a few steps. Because of our trajectory, our pathway, we're in an amazing position where you can get in, get involved, participate in the growth, and be able to feel the reward of that at arguably, a tenth of probably the cost of some insane opportunity with, Cloud9, or I think we've seen like large scale BMW situations over across teams in Europe. I think we present a really unique opportunity that I think if you really looked at it, anybody would be excited to get involved.
Yeah, and I think it's a unique situation because you're not investor owned like Dignitas or Complexity, for instance, or Cloud9 with a smaller investor pool.
Yeah.
But I guess if a big investor, I don't know, let's just say like Drake with 100 Thieves or Michael Jordan with NRG, you can't really do that with Golden Guardians. But if there is a bigger, not sponsor, because sponsors know how to do that. They just write a check, right? But it's unique where like a lot of the industry may not have access to you guys as Golden Guardians because you're privately owned and with a, Golden State Warriors backing. But, if I went to, let's just say, EG is a pretty big organization. But if I came to them with a, I don't know, Nike sponsorship because I'm a Nike, I could probably get in through their doors. I'm not saying we can't get in through your doors, but for the audience, how would they get involved with someone like Golden Guardians? Not only just to support, but if somebody says, hey, I want to build your e-commerce site or I got this sponsor that what does that look like? Or is that even something that can be entertained?
No, absolutely. I would never say never. I think with respect to how we operate, I think we do it more from a like ease of operation standpoint. So, for example, I guess the best way to point it, the NBA organization obviously most recently built the Chase Center, right? That is a huge entertainment initiative. As you can imagine, they didn't only build it for basketball. They want to do more and be more. So there's actually like a ton of different ways that you can get involved. You can get effectively related to not only Golden Guardians, but the Golden State Warriors, the Warriors Gaming Squad, which is the NBA 2K, the digital team. There's actually so many different avenues, but you kind of start at the top with respect to with Golden Guardians, with the Golden State Warriors. It's a much higher level conversation, I think, out at the get go, because I think a lot of people want to say like, oh, I just want to like try to throw my chip in. I think we're more. I would say like we're more like revolutionary, I guess, in the concept that like we always want to talk and be bigger. I think a lot of these teams are like, yeah, can we just do something small in like esports? Like, oh yeah, sponsor comes in. Oh yeah, can we just do something like small? Yeah, we could, but again, we're the Golden State Warriors, right? If you want to do something, let's go big. Let's do something no one else is doing. Let's do something no one else is capable of doing. And I think that's what sets us aside and makes us super unique to work with in esports relative to all these other investment-backed groups.
Yeah, that's it. And again, for the audience, the Chase Center, newest arena in America, give or take maybe some NFLs coming out. But for NBA, it's right there in San Francisco, which actually is San Francisco's first arena outside of baseball. It's right there on the bay. It's beautiful. Chase has done a great job there. And just knowing the team from up close, I know that in the coming years, they're going to do more with the Warriors, more with the team. And I think it's necessary to get those two companies married together more and more, because as you're seeing the trajectory of success go, we always joke with some of the players that we manage around the world is like, what do you want more? Do you want to play for a championship team, or do you want to play for a team that may win a championship one day, but you feel like a champion every day? And if you know what I mean by that, it's exactly like the Golden State Warriors. I'm not saying you're never going to win a championship. Clearly, your trajectory is proving everyone wrong. But if this team never wins a championship, what I'm telling players about the Golden Guardians is you're on a championship franchise. You're winning before you ever won. You're in an organization that's teaching and creating greatness. And I lived in Frisco, so I'm kind of biased. But, that's what I tell people. And that's what you just don't get from, I don't want to name names, but the other 9 teams in the league. You know? So I like that. And I think it's a tribute to what you guys are creating. Yeah.
No, I couldn't align more on that concept. I think that's been the biggest thing for us, is recognizing that building that foundation, that pathway, is how you're going to find that sustained success. I think so far, at least with respect to the LCS, but this is not an uncommon trend in esports, where teams spend a lot of money and they try to put up this facade of being, the premier organization. They try to pretend they are at the scale and the scope of what the Warriors have done in basketball. And obviously you start seeing cracks in the foundation in the first 6 months, the first 12 months, even if they manage to win an event, or they put together a 2-event series of wins, you start seeing that, okay, it's going to fall apart really fast, really quickly. And I think the most interesting thing, I think what we're going to be able to do when we do climb that mountain, when we win our championship, is you're going to see us up there and stay competitive. I'm not guaranteeing we're going to win 6 splits in a row. But when we're up there, we're going to be competitive every single one of those splits. Whereas I think what we've seen historically in esports is teams who kind of like shoot for the moon, fall either just short or hit it, and then they just kind of like dwindle off, right? I think a really an unfortunate example, honestly, of this is CLG. I think that's Madison Square Garden, their group. Unfortunately, I think just as or just prior to their acquisition, they managed to pull together a championship. Was really interesting. It was one of the most domestically successful rosters we've seen. But unfortunately, since then they've completely fallen on the wayside. It's been they've kind of got the inverse trajectory as us. They've been on the steady decline, and most recently they let go of their coaching leadership. There's an assumption that there's going to be a pretty significant overhaul of their talent rosters. And this is not just League of Legends, right? It impacts everything. The struggle of this team is going to send shockwaves out through all of their other initiatives. And I think that's the kind of thing that I don't think you'll ever see with Golden State Warriors, with Golden Guardians.
You know, it's very funny that you said that, because as we were, talking, I was listening to you speak, and I'm in this industry. I couldn't even remember all 10 teams' names.
Yep.
No, really, Danon. I actually forgot Immortals and CLG for like 10 seconds. I had to search their, literally, if I could prove it, I typed LOL LCS standings on Google because I forgot Immortals and CLG. And CLG is not a name you forget in the industry. So, Danon gave a really good example, guys, that CLG is a multi-million-dollar organization, 100+ million valuation. They run everything under the sun in America for the longest time. And now I couldn't even remember their name.
Yep.
So what's going to happen if you don't think of your long-term plans and your business plan trajectory? Because they have a roster. I'm going to go out on a limb. You don't have to correct me. You don't have to say yes or no. You can just say a little wink or something. But I'm going to go out on the limb and say their roster salary is more expensive than yours and a few others. By way of total, because I'm looking at some of these players. Some of them are new, but like Stixay and Smoothie, they're not cheap players. And if you're gonna perform like that, then you really gotta weigh it. You gotta put your business cap back on and make kind of the tough decision, like EG did with Huni. So it is what it is. Business is business, but you gotta be able to take off those different hats, right?
Yeah, for sure. Their roster was 3 super veterans. I think another, you already brought up the other name that's probably interesting to talk about, which is Immortals. Yeah. Now, obviously, they're in a weird state where they were in the league. For those who weren't following the LCS, they were in the league years ago. They got accused of effectively overinflating salaries. They came in and paid a lot of players a lot of money out the gate to try to be super competitive. And they did really well. They had one of the single most successful regular seasons in the history of the league, only to kind of fester out in the playoffs. And then ultimately, on the back of the league franchising and selecting permanent partners, they actually failed kind of like the soft inspection, the interview process, with there kind of being an understanding that, when you inflate the prices the way they did potentially, and you don't immediately recoup that through your sales, your marketing efforts, like you're not seeing revenue on the back end, maybe not the most appropriate franchise partner. Now, they kind of evolved, went through a whole series of things outside of the LCS. They went through some initiatives with Overwatch and Activision Blizzard's Overwatch League. They made efforts around Call of Duty with Activision, as well as a handful of other top esports. And then now they've come back as kind of this behemoth group to re-enter the LCS, only to kind of misstep and fall on their face once again out the gate. They came in, they paid a lot of money for probably the most super veteran roster you've ever seen. Now notice I said super veteran and not all-stars. So This roster is probably some of the most veteran players in the league that weren't regarded or highly regarded as top talent in historically. So they came out the gate and they said, let's just build a very solid foundation of older players. And again, it was kind of a swing and a miss. They took the perennial jungler for the league and the perennial bot lane for the league, mashed them together for their first initiative this year, which is their first franchise year as an organization. And I think we just saw yesterday or a day or two ago, they just released probably about half their roster, let go another coach, and this was only a month or two after they let go both their GM and their head coach, much in the same facet as what CLG is seeing right now.
And I love the fact that you guys are the only. Well, that's not true, actually. I think I think the Philadelphia 76ers own. I was going to say the only NBA franchise with the team, but that's not true because I think
we're the only wholly owned NBA franchise. A lot of other teams have NBA influence, but it's not usually the actual, like the 76ers themselves don't own Dignitas. One of the owners of the 76ers invests in them. Same thing with the 100 Thieves. One of the owners of the Cleveland Cavaliers has investment in 100 Thieves. I think there's a handful of teams that have pieces. We are wholly owned and operated by.
And what I was going to say is that's very, very important when it comes down to what you just said in the last couple minutes about because if you're going to just keep firing coaches, and if you're going to keep just wasting talent and import slots and blah blah blah, then you're left at the end of the year just trying to fix a broken glass and put it back together. And there's always going to be one missing piece of glass that flew over there, and you're just not going to put it together. So you're always going to leak, water from the glass, and that's what the case is for some of the teams that aren't ready. And they're not ready for that success if they get it. And if they don't get it, they don't know how to kind of go on damage control because they're freaking out. You guys have two people to go to in your back office to say, hey, when you fired that coach in 94, or you fired 17 coaches in 2001 to what the hell was going on there? Because you still got to pay them. You still got to go through the legal and the timing and everything. But you're not having to make those mistakes, are you? You're not. You're able to like leapfrog some of those mistakes, which is why you're able to take that steady, slow route to the top.
Yeah, no, the access, the resources that the Warriors provide for us is tantamount to insanity for any sports organization. One of the first things I did when I came in was kind of like look and ask and say, hey, you guys took this team that was recognized as one of the most struggling teams in the league, even just like not even just struggling as like a basketball team, struggling as a business. And you were able to turn that around like in a metaphorical overnight, right? It was probably over the course of a couple of years, but procedure wise, with respect to like transitioning to this to esports, it was effectively overnight. And I was just like, I need to know, like, I want you to outline like what and how. What's really cool about that is it actually aligned a lot with some of my internal goals already for how I like to operate. I think being able to lean on and recognize quickly young domestic talent is huge, and being able to see and understand the pathway, what you were just talking through, right, with respect to the cracked glass. I think again, the thing that the Warriors understand is how to sustain success, sustained excellence. And I think a lot of teams really struggle when they do find their rhythm to get to the top. They really struggle at staying there. And I think I'm really optimistic that we've got it completely right, that when we actually do start hitting those benchmarks, that we're going to keep hitting them consistently.
Yeah, I respect you guys a lot for what you're doing and understanding the fact that it is cliche to say, well, they're owned by the Warriors. Of course they can do it. Well, yeah, okay, no problem. But did you know, my friends out there in the metaverse, that their star player right here, Mr. Damon's star player on the Golden State Warriors, is Mr. Steph Curry. Mr. Steph Curry, maybe I should have kept this to myself, invested in their rival team that just took them out to go to Worlds. Right. And look at that freaking story. Right. Well, look at that full circle story where you got the star player that came on to Golden State Warriors at a time when the Warriors were really nothing. And he took that team to, well, we already know the story, triple championship, everything. And this guy went and invested a big amount of money. I'll let you Google it, into the rival organization. Now that should tell you the level of respect that these guys want to command. And now come at us, Mr. Steph, huh?
Well, okay. And I gotta add a funny little tidbit on that one. So what's really interesting is, and I hope I don't get yelled at for releasing this, but I want to say the way this conversation actually panned out was Steph got interested in esports as a concept.
Right.
I think like the Warriors in general, everyone in the organization is very, very bought in. And I'm not talking like, just the Warriors front office, just, some of the leadership people. I'm talking like the Warriors is like a 600 person organization, 600 employees. And like, there's probably like an 80% uptake in interest. Like a lot of these people on just the finance side, HR, legal, marketing, sales, every facet, everybody is interested. We hold internal seminars, and so many people pop up and ask questions and want to get involved. Either they directly are very interested, or they've got kids who are very interested. They've got siblings who are very interested. But what's funny about this is that I think Steph actually, through those initiatives, he became aware of esports through the Warriors caring about it. And I actually think he approached and said, hey, I want to get involved. And the unfortunate reality of what happened, and again, I think I'm allowed to say this, I think he's actually not legally allowed to be involved in Golden Guardians because that would be effectively a similar consideration to having equity in an NBA team, right? Sure. Which currently, according to the NBA league rules, active players cannot own portions of the team they're playing for, right? Yeah. This is some equivalency. It's not like literally that, but like by some extension of that rule. Right. So when he looked at it, he actually was forced, if he wanted to get involved in esports, to look at other teams. And obviously in this case, he just, he had to pick a rival.
It's funny though, right? Because let's remove the money or the large amount or whatever, and just put. I mean, look, you guys, everything we just talked about on this episode for 40 minutes straight, we would have not been able to talk about. Let's be honest. Yeah. If Steph came in or anybody came in day one, you guys would have had a totally different trajectory. Probably either won it or be winning or maybe not. Who knows? You never know. But it would have been a totally different path, and it wouldn't have been the same story as if you just told the audience today. Mm-hmm. And I would argue with anybody that would want to argue and debate this, that this story is more relevant than a roller coaster story.
Yeah, then the old Immortals roster, they came in, they inflated, they found some amount of success, and then kind of collapsed on the back of not building something sustainable and simultaneously not getting accepted as like a functional revenue partner, right?
And somewhere out there, Mr. Cronky Entertainment, if you're listening, this team is not for sale. They are not going to sell. But no, the funny thing is that you cannot literally do anything. They don't need the money, as in the organization, for the bid. You know what I mean? Yep. And so why not continue creating excellence? And they will not settle for 9th and 10th place every single season, which you're not doing anyway. But this is the beautiful thing about esports, is that I'm so excited for the industry of esports that we finally have a player that cannot be compromised, cannot be, bought or sold, and is only doing it for literally just to win. And if they win, and when they win, they're going to get really the biggest golden star of ever in esports history. I'm not just saying that to tell you on the podcast. Give me another example. Okay, maybe like Schalke in LEC. Give me another example. I
don't know, man. Schalke didn't have anything going for them spring. Like it's a really cool story. I've been part of Cinderella stories. I was part of the crazy, insane, for people unaware.
Some of your
you also invoked Cronky, which we'll get into in a bit. But with respect to going through the crazy pathways, I did that at Cloud9. We went through the Cinderella run. This was a split where we got 7th, so we missed playoffs. But with the old format, there was kind of like a redemption arc opportunity as long as you made top 7. If we had fallen to 8th by 1 game, you lose all of your basically carryover points. We hit 7th through tiebreakers by some miracle, just to give ourselves the last seed of what is kind of this last chance qualifier. We call it in our region, we call it informally the gauntlet. Formally, it's known as our regional qualifier to the World Championships. So we came in as the last seed, and it's a King of the Hill style format, which is dreadful, terrifying, insanely painful. I don't think there's a good traditional sports equivalency of this.
Which game?
This is League of Legends.
League of Legends, okay.
Yeah, so at Cloud9, we came in as the bottom seed for a King of the Hill format where we have to play a best of 5 every day for 3 straight days. Just to give you some to parallel this to what we're seeing now, like the most intense League of Legends schedule you see is you play 2 best of ones every weekend, or in playoffs you play 1 best of 5 every weekend. 1 best of 5 every weekend. You prepare for one team for about a week. It's very, very synonymous with like the NFL.
Right.
For this format, just because it's kind of like thrown together and we're trying to like just figure out another team for Worlds at the last second. We don't have a lot of time left. It's like, okay, you're playing 3 matches, 3 days in a row, and you don't like win at the end. You just get a chance to keep playing more games. So this would be the equivalent of deciding that, you know, the 4 teams that didn't make the NFL playoffs have to all play each other for 3 straight days. There's no break in between. You're playing 3 football games 3 days in a row against 3 top competitive teams. And then after you win, you fly for 16 hours and you just keep playing more games against even better teams. So I was part of that, and I can recognize the narrative, right? I can recognize the value from like an entertainment product, but I don't ever justify that my history, my experience at that as what we should do or why we should do things the way we do. I think there's always an opportunity for handling things better, growing and evolving as a sport. So with respect to those, I think for sure I would rather have an appropriate built out narrative that like you can look and point and hold people accountable for everything that's happened. I think that's so much cooler from like a business success standpoint. I think that's much healthier for the league than the insane Cinderella stories. I want them to happen, but that's the way I'll frame it. I want those to happen. I don't want to be involved. My heart can't handle it. I can't do it. I'd rather watch.
For the purposes of this year, and move on, would you have been a Cinderella story if you got to the Worlds?
That's what's so funny. I think a lot of people would recognize it as yes. Internally, it would be like a massive, huge, overwhelming no. I think the public for sure is always a little bit like, especially post-franchising, so many people are trying to find their footing. I think the Golden Guardians, Golden State Warriors, year 1 kind of was like a little bit of a weird ramp up. So people got kind of like a weird misread on it before I joined about like 13 months into their existence. But like externally, yeah, absolutely. I think the narrative from the talent crew, the casters, the narrative from fans, probably even the narrative from our own fans was, you know, this team's good. They can be good. Are they like Worlds good? Are they like top competitive challenge for a split? Probably not, but that's okay because that's not what they're trying to do right now, right? They're really young. They're really cost effective. They're just trying to make sure they get things right. They build a really solid foundation. I think everyone knew that. I think internally, though, we set our expectations much higher because we just know we have damn good players. I think every single player recognized internally how capable each of their teammates were. We have not only an amazing front office, but an amazing support staff with respect to kind of being very holistic, recognizing every area that we can help players be better in. Yep. And because of that, internally, it felt, and it still feels like a championship team, a championship organization, where every day we're waking up and we're expecting to win the games. It doesn't matter if we're facing a seed that's higher than us on the standings or on the ladder, where we're very confident every single game has been. And I think if you go back and look, our matches against the number 1 seed, currently the best team in North America, Team Liquid, every single game was absolutely winnable. If anything, it was more on us for not executing, closing those games out and winning them than it was on the other team stepping up and just playing better than us in any capacity. I think we showed that if we find any level of stability against that top team after, the mid game strategically, that we're going to be just absolutely terrifying for anyone to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, arguably outside of NA is pretty obvious, but outside of NA, if you would have made Worlds, you would have been by far the scariest team because nobody expected it, nobody knew, and they still kind of don't know anything about you.
And there's no good way to solve for how we play the game, for how we execute. I think the scariest thing about us was we're starting to get a grip on the strategy of the game while just fundamentally being better than our opponents. And that's in sports, that's probably the most terrifying thing to run into is like when you're a top player and you're very confident and you run into a team where it doesn't matter. Like there's just nothing you can functionally do because they play the game at such a high level fundamentally that even if you like arguably try to outplay a couple times, it in the grand scheme of how the game operates, being a team game, it just doesn't end up mattering.
And League of Legends is such a momentum game. I don't care what anybody says. The worst team on any given day can be the best, and a championship team can be the worst. Like, it's an any given Sunday type of game, very indicative of that football, like you mentioned, once a week. This is all you get. This is all the marbles. Everybody in football says the same thing. We practice better, coach. We did better in practice all week. How the hell did we not do that play? And the same thing is said in League of Legends. Our scrims were the best. We 5-0'd them every week. Okay, yeah, but the stage is a different animal. And C9 in the first split and FlyQuest in the second split, they live on the stage. I don't care what they did in scrims, they live for the stage. And you've got guys like Wild Turtle that can pick it up, to bring it full circle and to end it off, we've heard a lot about the trajectory. We know what to look for. We obviously are seeing the growth and trajectory. What's the goal for the upcoming year? Obviously, we want to do better. You want to get from 5th to 4th or 3rd. You want to go to Worlds, but let's say we ended up at 5th place. In 1 year from now, I talk to you again. We didn't make Worlds. We did our best. We got some new pieces and this and that, but we're here again at 5th place. We did our best. What are we going to add more to? Are we going to work on our social media? Are we going to work on our merch? What can we give the fans to look after more in the coming year outside of just gameplay?
So I think you'll see new spin-ups of initiatives across the board. I think for Golden Guardians as a brand, don't be surprised if you see us expand into more teams. We take on more initiatives just to be more kind of like all around and more involved. We want to support esports as a concept, not just any individual sport that we're involved in. I think just as an entertainment property, that's a cool thing to do. But yeah, I think you'll definitely see better run-ups. You'll see more merchandising efforts. You'll definitely see more sales marketing efforts. Simultaneously, our content team is just getting off the ground. You see they've already put some amazing stuff, as you already mentioned in the chat, linked out. That was put together so quickly, so awesomely during COVID. I think as we kind of like reintegrate back into the office, as we get back into our flow of everything, you'll see probably 3 to 4 times that output at the exact same or higher quality. So you'll be able to like really find, there'll definitely be a lot of pathways you can get involved. I think especially that going into next year, you'll see a lot of social media initiatives. I think there's been this like big social media war, not internally, but externally for the industry, trying to understand like Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these different avenues. And I think for the most part, with the world slowing down, people have started to recognize where and how you can leverage that value. I already see and hear it in the partnerships conversations. So I think if you're someone who wants to be involved and wants to stay on top of things, keep looking out for our social media initiatives. I think we'll be growing. I think we'll be doing some cool community-based stuff. I think that'll give you your best pathway in the immediate, especially during COVID. And then, yeah, like I said, going into next year, look for our content to be booming. Ideally, we don't have to have that conversation a year from now. Ideally, we're not in that position. But if we are, I think you'll still be very pleased with the progress we make on all the other areas.
And that's the dream, right? Is to continuously grow and to win eventually. And if you don't, you got to win in other areas.
Yep.
And, with this team, everybody take a look at them. They're young, they're exciting. They're going to add some new pieces. They're going to add some new features, as he said, some new teams. And they're really, that's when you answered that, it gives a lot of confidence to the fan because it's not always about winning. Because if you're an Immortals fan right now and you're hoping, you're going to
win.
So don't lose sleep or sight over the player or the team that failed or didn't make it. Because look at Faker and T1. So It's not always about like being the best and winning, but if you look at the all-encompassing picture, another good one is Fnatic.
Yep.
Then you don't always need to win like the G2, right? Yep. And so winning is indicative of success, but success is not indicative of what the organization looks like of winning. And you can win multiple different places. to top it all off, we met about almost a year ago now. And everything from that year that we've met has just been a trajectory up. I remember I was fortunate enough to join you guys in San Francisco for that boat party. And we were all kind of like, well, where is the esports, announcement? And mark my words, I'm not even working with you guys, but mark my words, this year on the boat party, they're going to make an announcement. So, thank you for coming on, Dane, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
I have messages up the wazoo saying, effing great convo, killed it. Thank you so much. So really, really, this was a really insightful one. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Thanks for having me.
I linked some of your stuff in there. I'll shoot
thank you for that.
Your LinkedIn out to some friends, and please stay in touch and support our boys. A lot more to come.
Yeah, make sure to tune into the next Playtime sessions.
I appreciate you. Thank you, brother. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, you too. Later.
And thank you. It was an amazing one. That was one of my favorite ones in a long time. It was obviously the longest one we did. And I appreciate you guys for staying on so long. And thank you so much for Dane and the Golden State Warriors and Golden Guardians for their time today. We appreciate it. We'll follow up. Hopefully, about where the going. And that's what I think that they're going to be forced to be ready. So good luck to other people that don't have their stuff in it, but get ready for what the Golden Guardians can bring. I really appreciate being this time.